There's no other way to say it. The VMAX challenge broke me. When I embarked on this journey last year to win with every VMAX Pokemon ever printed, I thought it'd be a fun way to fill some streams between sets. But just like people who say you can massage a foot without using oil, I was wrong. This was a massive mistake with absolutely no take-backsies. So I don't have to relive too much of the harrowing experience. I'm going to do things a little differently in the second and final part of my VMAX challenge recap video. Partially because of the bad memories, partially because of the low views the first video got, and definitely not because I'm lazy and don't want to search for footage from like 20 different streams. Definitely not that. So instead of covering every single VMAX that I played, I'm just going to go over the one that caused me the most stress. And if you watch the VMAX challenge live, you know that honor belongs to the stupid, abhorrent waste of digital cardboard known as Espeon VMAX. Somebody at the Pokemon Company really said, what if we made a 3-prize Pokemon that does 0 damage, and everyone else in the room nodded along in agreement. I know, technically Espeon VMAX can also do upwards of 6,000 damage with its attack, but against a deck like Lost Box that attacks for free, or a deck like Mew VMAX that only needs 1 attached energy in play, it's useless. That explains why Espeon VMAX broke me 58 VMAXs into the challenge. Another part is that the pre-evolution Espeon V is also garbage. Worst case scenario in this challenge, I could just attach a memory capsule to the VMAX and use one of the attacks from the V. Except Espeon V's first attack only does 60 damage, and it only does it to Pokemon V. The second attack, meanwhile, only does 120 damage for 3 energy. So even if I get 3 energy and a memory capsule on it, I'm still maxing out at 120. And if I have a double turbo energy attached, it's only 100 damage. That is worse than Garbodor VMAX. And if you wanted me to do a head-to-head comparison, I'd say Garbodor VMAX is better. It has 330 hit points instead of 310, poisons, and Garbodor can have 2 tools attached, meaning you can mess with your opponent using things like Spirit Mast, which forces your opponent to discard a card from their hand if they attack you. And do you know what? I won in just my first game with Garbodor. Like I say all the time and everyone agrees, I'm a great deck builder and someone who never misplays. So if I struggle with a card, it's the card, not me. Never. Oh, and there were rules to the VMAX challenge to make things more difficult. Basically, the VMAX had to be the main attacker, I couldn't use Arceus V-Star since it would help me out too much, and I needed a 4-3 line of every VMAX in the deck. Yeah, I don't think praying to Arceus would have done anything to help me here. Before we begin my descent into madness, leave your guess in the comments as to how many games you'll think it'll take me to win with Espeon VMAX. I'll give you a hint, it's more than 1 but less than 50. Alright, let's kick things off with Game 2, which was against Lost Box, an absolutely horrible matchup. Lost Box can literally win the entire battle with 0 energy in play. And if I somehow managed to get a memory capsule and DTE on an Espeon VMAX, I still couldn't one-shot a freaking Cramorant. While Espeon's ability does protect against Sablei's Lost Mine, it only protects your Pokemon with energy attached. Since this version of the deck isn't designed to have a lot of energy spread around, this is a wake-up slap to just how bad Espeon is. If only I'd known how much worse things would get. Games 3 and 4 were against Zoroark V-Star. Not only does Zoroark have the potential to one-shot an Espeon, but when your opponent is able to attack with Liepard to hit for weakness, and Charon's Care their damage Zoroark at the exact right time, you stand no chance. I should also mention that Zoroark is another deck that can get by having as little as 1 attached energy in play. Again, who thought it would be a good idea to print a VMAX that does 0 damage? Game 5 was against Darkrai V-Star, meaning I never stood a chance because Espeon decided it wanted to be weak to Dark types. So I lost that game, and for the first time in the entirety of the VMAX challenge, I was going to Game 6. There was a glimmer of hope in that 5th game though. I thought they had misplayed on their final turn, but it turned out they copied my ability to be a master at baiting, and they had a switch. I still believe that if it wasn't for weakness, I would have won the game though. Game 6, Path to the Peak shut off everything I tried to do, and Dragapult Arceus destroyed me. But Game 7, that's where I should have had a guaranteed win. Lunatone Solrock floods the field with energy, and even if it didn't, Lunatone is so weak that I can one-shot it with Espeon V's attack. Now, it's at this point that you're probably wondering about the Orbeetle. Espeon sucked so much that I had to find a way to put energy on my opponent's side of the field. Orbeetle achieves that. Except it's a stage 2 and requires your opponent to have energy in the discard pile, which isn't always guaranteed. Anyways, if you couldn't have guessed already, I lost. It was so painful. They even managed to deal 330 damage on the final turn to KO my Orbeetle just to flex on me. In Game 8, I faced this really weird Jolteon VMAX Lightning Box deck that always seemed to flip heads on Spark. Don't know what Spark does? I don't blame you. It's kinda like Melanie with a coin flip, but for lightning energy. All I had to do to win this game was KO their Magnezone V-Star early. But thanks to Big Charm and Double Turbo Energy lowering my damage, I was 10 damage short. So they followed it up with a 360 damage Raichu V attack. Just why? Clearly I was cursed or something. And if you thought it couldn't get worse, Game 9 was against Giratina V-Star. It's like Lost Box, except they can remove their energy with Giratina's attack, meaning I don't really have a revenge attack. So that was a lot of fun. Oh, and Game 10 was against Zoroark V-Star. Yes, again, Zoroark again. And no, I didn't win. Because Espeon VMAX is literally the worst card ever printed, I actually took a week off from the VMAX challenge. I just couldn't convince myself to put myself through this torture again. At the rate things were going, I was never going to win. Eventually, though, I caved in. With a different list that ditched the Orbeetle and focused more on healing, reattaching energy with Shadow Rider, and using Espeon V's attack with Memory Capsule, I queued up against a Miltank. Yeah, I don't really have a counter for Miltank. Against all odds, though, I did manage to knock it out, and my reward was finding out that a Darkrai V-Star was hiding in that deck. That was a hard-fought battle that I ended up losing. Then it finally happened. Game 12 was against Lunatone Solrock. That was probably my best matchup so long as they couldn't build up an absolutely massive Lunatone. Ironically, this was my second attempt at Game 12 against a Lunatone Solrock deck. In 12A, I had the perfect setup, but they conceded before I took a knockout, invalidating any win due to the rules of the challenge. But in Game 12B, against another Lunatone Solrock deck, karma was on my side. While my start was far worse this time around, I am awesome. Well, technically they failed to get the card they needed at the key moments, but I choose to believe it was all skill. Here's the winning moment in all its glory. Come on, this is it. This is the biggest moment in the history of Pokemon TCG Live. If they have I feel like they would play Boss's Orders if they had it. Yes! Yes! Go nuts! Yes! They don't have it. They don't have it. They don't have it. Yes. Oh, okay. An escape rope doesn't matter. An escape rope, I still win. They would have to have. They can't have cross switcher, because a cross switcher wouldn't do it. Because a cross switcher would just switch them into a Solrock. So unless they have cross switcher or scoop up net. Yes! Finally! We're done! It's really over! It's finally over! We are finally done! We have finally won! The game has ended, we have won. It's finally over. We finally did it. It is the greatest moment in TCG Live history. The nightmare was finally over. Well, the Espeon nightmare, not the VMAX challenge nightmare. I still had like 25 more VMAXs to go before the end. As for the rest of the Pokemon VMAX I used in Year 2, while I'm not showing you the gameplay footage, I did stream the entire challenge, so there are several people who can confirm that I completed it. Yes, there were some people crazy enough to suffer through a dozen Espeon VMAX battles with me, all while equally suffering through the pain of watching me just play Pokemon TCG Live. They are the true Pokemon masters. If you're surprised that I managed to win with VMAX like Flapple and Trevenant in only one game, you clearly don't know how amazing I am at Pokemon cards. It definitely had nothing to do with my opponent's breaking, or drawing poorly, or Live's ranking system meaning absolutely nothing. Nope, 100% pilot dominance. Though it would have been nice to use Max Tree more than once or twice, easily the most creative name for an attack ever. While I forced you to watch random gameplay clips from the VMAX challenge, I'll quickly recap some of the more interesting VMAX Pokemon battles that I had. Keep in mind that I took super fast notes while streaming, so things aren't as fleshed out. Okay, starting with Corviknight VMAX, I won in my first game against Jolteon VMAX because they didn't realize that Corviknight's ability stops the effects of all abilities, so their Inteleon and Zigzagoon were useless. Crystal Cave also helped heal off damage every single turn. It was a very easy Game 1 win. Celebi VMAX sucks, but I was able to beat Darkrai V-Star in Game 2 thanks to Weakness and Memory Capsule, which allowed me to use Line Force, dealing just enough damage to take KOs. I've always thought Sandaconda VMAX had potential, it just never really put it together. But when you mix in my Brilliance with 4 Stone Energy and Lake Acuity, meaning Sandaconda takes 100 less damage, plus a battle against Lost Box where I was able to use Marnie early and often, I got a Game 1 win, because I'm just that amazing. Miltank was the bane of my existence the entire challenge. With Flareon VMAX, I lost to a Miltank in Game 1, then I lost to a Miltank in Game 3. But in Game 4, I had a great start, wasn't milling anything too precious, and my opponent used Dragonite's V-Star power for nothing, all but shoring up a win. Yeah, Dragonite V-Star is terrible, but not as bad as Espeon VMAX. My second game with Sylveon was going terribly. It was against Radiant Steelix, and all of the cards I needed were prized. Not only that, Sylveon came up 30 damage short on their Zacian V, which would have saved me. But then my opponent got cocky and used Thornton on that damaged Zacian V, putting Steelix into play. By doing that, Steelix was knocked out since damage counters carried over. Misplays counted in this challenge, and all in all, that was a crazy final game with Sylveon. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but my deck building prowess is amazing because I built Garbodor VMAX with Panic Mask. This meant that whenever they hit into me, they had to discard 2 cards from their hand. I will say that things were looking dicey, as it was Empoleon with the Stage 2 Goodra, meaning Empoleon was immune to Garbodor VMAX. But while I couldn't do damage, Garbodor's attack prevents retreating, and Empoleon's attack forces them to send energy to someone on the bench. So they ultimately lost via deck out because they couldn't attack. Yes, I'm not only a master baiter, but a master deck builder as well. There's a major problem with Surfing Pikachu VMAX. It's a lightning type that attacks with water energy. Because of its lightning typing, Surfing Pikachu doesn't work with Frostmoth or Palkia. But using my Detective Pikachu-like sleuthing skills, I found someone who could help. The Frostlass that literally no one has ever played until now. It still took me 4 games to win because yes, Surfing Pikachu is bad, and maybe my opponent only ever had a Flapple V on the field, but we count those, okay? Chandelure VMAX's main weakness is the fact that it can deal 0 damage turn after turn if your opponent limits their hand. Was this going to be another Espeon situation? Nope. I used the Alcremie that forces them to draw a card while also healing my Chandelure with Cheryl. The end of Game 2 was a little sketchy as they just needed a choice belt for game, but thankfully they whiffed. Then they got cocky, promoted Meowth knowing they had no trainers in hand and figured I'd do 0 damage. But I hit them with a Marnie and won. Galaxy Brain Player. Of course I'm going to highlight the 69th VMAX Pokemon ever made. Looking like it was taken straight from an episode of South Park, Cinderace VMAX stands on its gigantic ball. Despite me calling it bad repeatedly, it does have the ability to one-shot anybody given that it can use Single Strike energy to boost the damage. I faced Mew Game 1 and everyone bet their channel points on me losing, but they forgot I'm a god gamer. A clutch Scroll of Scorn allowed me to one-shot a Mew VMAX. Then, after, well, we're not going to call it a monumental misplay that nearly cost me the game, but after that oopsie, I loaded up another Cinderace and managed to deal 320 damage to a Mew VMAX, somehow winning in my first game with this thing. You wouldn't believe how many channel points non-believers lost. Kingler is an F-tier VMAX. Even with a choice belt, it can't one-shot a 280 hit point V-Star. Utter madness, if you ask me. After 4 games of flipping tails on Kingler V's Falling Bubbles, I finally got myself off in Game 5. I still have no idea what my opponent was playing. There was a Psyduck and a Lapras and a Choi. Who plays Choi? But a win's a win no matter how ugly it is. I truly thought Deoxys would be the next Espeon. 5 games in and nothing was going right. Deoxys is really only useful against V-Star decks, and even then not really. I'd faced V-Star decks along the way and lost because Deoxys has a crap attack. Thankfully, that 5th game worked out for me and I won, further proving my supremacy over the VMAX Pokemon. For the 85th and final VMAX, we have Hatterene from Crown Zenith. How bad is Hatterene? Well, the odds of you one-shotting something as weak as a Luminion V are extremely low. It only deals 150 damage, 130 with the double turbo attached, and all it does is confuse your opponent. The ability isn't too great either. It just allows you to move 2 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to your opponent's active. Sure, having 4 in play means you're moving 8 of them, but it's still rough. Because I'm so awesome though, I did beat Lugia V-Star in Game 2 because apparently Hatterene destroys what was the BDIF at the time. And that's the end of the VMAX challenge. Or so I thought. A few weeks later, the Pokemon Company released a new Pikachu VMAX just to taunt me. But the joke's on them because this Pikachu VMAX isn't totally terrible. Sure, it sucks, requiring 4 energy to deal 250 damage, but the first attack does accelerate 3 energy into play. I was so over the VMAX challenge at this point that I didn't even bother taking in-depth notes. Literally all I wrote is, 1 in Game 3 with Pikachu VMAX, a 4 energy attack is stupid, but the VMAX challenge re-ended and I was victorious. For those of you hoping I further torment myself and do a V-Union or a V-Star challenge, there is a chance, but it'd be a stream-only challenge. So make sure you follow me on Twitch so as not to miss any of the hot card-on-card action.